All right, back again. What's happening? So in this one, I don't know if you guys have seen this video. If not, I recommend you guys check it out. Williston audio. He does a lot of reviews, amp dynos. In this case, 3 years ago, he did two Skar audio SDRs, and it's pretty much a prefab, preloaded, something you get off Amazon, real quick and cheap, already done. He did two of them in his I don't remember what the vehicle is, but yeah, anyway, check out the video. Pretty impressive that these two low-end 18s look kind of low-end in my opinion, of course, in comparison to some of the ridiculous subs that are out there. But I think he did pull off a 150. It was at a pretty high frequency. But yeah, check out the video, and then let me know what you think as well in the comments, of course. But what I'm doing is I'm cross-referencing horn response program, or Hornresp. I always call it horn response. I don't know why, it just rolls off the tongue. But I tried plugging in the numbers based on the subwoofer parameters, the TS parameters, and then the actual subwoofer enclosure itself. So let me click out of that real quick. Hold on one sec. All right, so this should be the numbers for the Skar 18 SDR. These should be the TS parameters for that. And let me pull up that diagram real quick. All right, so here's a side by side. These are the TS parameters for that SDR 18. So let's see, BL of 1711, 24 hertz, 24, VOS 206. So yeah, these numbers are as close as I can get them, so they match up quite well. If you ever played with this program or begin to play with it, you'll notice that messing with these TS parameters can be an extreme headache. They don't always match perfectly, and if you move one thing, it'll move other things, because they're all related in some way, like a spider web. They all kind of tie together. So the TS parameters that you get from the manufacturer, sometimes they're not spot on, or maybe they're lying about some of their numbers, or maybe they did their calculations when the subwoofer was brand spanking new, and the suspension is tighter. There's something going on there that ended up getting you some different numbers. But I always try to do my best to try to find the closest I can get to the actual manufacturer specs. And then so what I do from that point is I'll take plug all those numbers into the horn response program, or Hornresp. And we try to have fun by doing makeshift box, see what comes up. But in this case, we have a reference point because the Big D Wiz, he's already done put the subs in his vehicle and maxed them out, tested them out. And I like that video that D Wiz did, because his numbers are all there. He shows you in real time what's going on. He goes through a bunch of different frequency sweeps, so that's all good information. It's all crystal clear information. So for us guys that are trying to replicate things, you really need to have as many reference points as you possibly can to get a good idea of what that system's going to do. So all right, here we can see this is what the ported box would reference in Hornresp. So 163 liters, which I believe translates to roughly 4.75 cubes of chamber area, and then we have our port area, which should be dialed in as well. On the website, I believe it says tuned to 30 hertz. The box is tuned to 30 hertz. On the program, I think it's higher than that. I think it's 32. But like I said, we're trying to get things as close as we possibly can. Yeah, 32.6. So and like I said, what I'm trying to do is cross-reference the numbers that I get on the program versus real world scenarios in a cabin, you know, full power, full tilt, all that, so I can get an idea of how accurate my program is, how accurate everything is. So I actually need to turn down this X max to 15, so we'll do that right now. So we're doing a maximum of 1200 watts to look at our SPL numbers. So if you watch the video, he had 2 of those, and 2 of those did about a 150, I want to say. I don't remember the frequency. It was up in the higher range, 37 hertz, I think. But so right now this is showing 100 or 1200 watts with just a single one. So we can add a second one. Let's try to do that now. I want to say in parallel, and then crunch the numbers again. So alright, so here we go. This is what our curve would look like. It's showing at that power level we might have some issues with X max right here. So this is where things get a little bit confusing for me, because obviously in real world tests we didn't have those problems, and we were getting close to 150 dB. Now, you know, we need to take into account that there's some cabin gain, so maybe that's what we're lacking here. And I know in a horn response, it I believe it takes reference from about a meter's worth away if you were to place your sensor, your microphone, and then it does it in what's called quarter space. So let me show you what that looks like. When you see this right here, this is supposed to represent like a point, like maybe a corner in a wall, and you can change this. You can change it to a flat portion of the wall, an open flat area, and then just open suspended fields, what it says. So basically like you're out in the middle of nowhere, and just, I guess the speaker happens to be up off the ground or something. But I always measure just in eighth space is what it is, eighth space. So it gives you the highest numbers usually, and it usually reflects as close as you can possibly get into a cabin. But like I said, what I'm noticing now is that that's not necessarily the case, as our numbers are a little bit lower, which is a good thing. That means you would expect to have much higher numbers in real world scenarios. So looking back at the table here, so another thing I want you guys to notice, and I did notice in real world testing, is that his 218s in his vehicle, they were definitely peaky in the high range, and most of the time people think that 18s they dig low. In this case, if you watch his tests, anything below that tuning frequency, it really wasn't getting very loud. So this does kind of reference that. Anything below down to 40 hertz, you know, we're rolling off pretty good here. So, and that looked pretty accurate. Same thing with the high range, you know, it started to kind of roll off pretty quick. He didn't really do too many testings above that tuning, but at least that's what this shows now. So yeah, so that's what I'm doing now, guys, and I hope to continue on. If you guys have a build already done, you know your box dimensions, your port area, if you do as much information as I can get, if you have good solid TS parameters for your sub, the cleaner the better. So if you have probably shaking, if you have a DATS, you know, that helps out a lot to get better accurate numbers. So here's an example of that DATS wave, your graph there with all your TS parameters. That's another one. I'm not exactly sure how accurate the DATS actually is. It might be really accurate in that low power range, that 1 watt. But anything, once you start adding power to a sub, that does change the TS parameters. It changes the overall expected output power from your system, from that whole circuit. But yeah, anyway, I wanted to show you guys some real world comparisons. Check out that video so you can get a better idea of what I got going on here. But let's see, what else did I do? What else do I got? Let me pause for a second, get my brain going. Alright, so I went back and double checked my numbers. I did need to make an adjustment on the X-Max. Changed the X-Max to 13.5, which it actually is 13.5. It might actually be able to probably do more than that in real life, but that's what the manufacturer specs are, so we did that. I changed my to mimic the 2 subs in one cab. Instead of going parallel, I went series. So let's see what that goes, see what that does for our response curve. I keep clicking on the wrong thing. Power, max SPL, 1200 watts per sub. This might actually be for both subs, I'm not sure. 13.5 X max. Alright, still looks about the same, so. But like I said, I just want to make sure all my numbers are right. I don't think D-Wiz had any problems with over excursion, but like I said, I don't know for a fact. That's not my setup. But he definitely was getting into that 149, 150 SPL range. So that's what I was hoping to see here as well. But like I said, he's doing his tests in cab. These are supposed to be, you know, in reference to 8th space, which we now know is like a corner of a wall or something. There you go. So the other thing I'm doing here, guys, you know, while I'm learning the program, trying to cross-reference it to real-world designs and getting a feel for what box volume, box sizes will do, what TS parameters change, what you know, all of it, what's in control here, and how do you design a system so it does exactly what you want. So as I said earlier, typically 18s play really low, but you could see in this case, even with 4.5 cubes, 2 18s, box tuned to 30 hertz, we're really peaky up in that upper range. This is showing 54 hertz. I'm not sure what Big D Wiz's max, you know, tuning frequency, SPL frequency. I want to say 37. I should go back and look. You know what? I will do that. Give me 1 sec. Okay, so he's doing a 148.8 at 47 hertz. So yeah, that's I mean, that's pretty dang good. I mean, even though it was up at, you know, 47 hertz, that's up there. But it was a Sequoia in which he did it in, so that's a pretty large cabin. That sounds reasonable. That much cone area, you know, that's a lot of space to fill up. But that sounds about right? I mean, obviously it's got to be, because that's what he did. Don't see no issues about bottoming out the subs or over X max. But like I said, in real life, those Skars probably will allow more X max than 13 millimeters. But yeah, so let's looking at this, you know, waveform. I've done my best to try to, you know, assume what 2 subs would do. I just seen in the video, he mentioned that he did a video with a single one, so I'll go over that and cross-reference that. That'd probably be a little bit easier than doing 2 subs, since I'm not really sure how that's combined, you know, how the program combines the 2. So as you can see, you can do it either in parallel or in series, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. Isobaric too, that's a whole different way of combining a set of subs, which I do plan on doing an isobaric setup, so I need to know how to utilize that. But we'll keep this in parallel since it raises that total a little bit more. What did I want to do here? So let me go to the subwoofer parameters, go to X max. First max out the power. Then we'll go to X max. So he was putting close to, I want to say 3,000 watts there. You know, so for him not to have issues, assuming this program is correct, that means those subs may have been seen, upwards of 20 millimeters, one-way X-Max, so 40 millimeters of travel. Do I believe that for sure? I don't know. Skar subs they're pretty good, and even those being the SDRs, pretty much entry level. I mean, maybe, man, maybe. If any of you guys have experience with those subwoofers, let me know. So yeah, they can do way more than 13 millimeter X-Max for sure. So, but yeah, these are the numbers that I'm seeing. So, if I was to have gone through and done this setup, this is based on the program. This is what we'd be looking at. But if it was me personally, I putting 18s in a Sequoia, I would expect low frequencies. I'm all about the lows, so I would be geared towards making sure that was the number one thing anyway, number one priority for me. All day listening, making sure that it gets nice and low. So I would be very upset if I would have purchased two of those 18s just like it is, the prefab box, order off Amazon, and then put it in the Sequoia. I used to have a 4Runner, same thing pretty much. And then for it to not really give me any lows, I would have been very disappointed with that setup. So it would have been a waste for me, in my opinion. I probably would have just built my own box, tuned it lower. So, but that's the next step. That's what I did here. So 2 things here before we move on. Like I said, for me personally, I would have chosen the lows, thinking that 18s would have been good enough. I would have probably gone to a smaller sub, so something like a 12, and then built the box that was tuned low for that. So being that was my way of thinking, I thought, well, what if we start comparing large cone area subwoofers and boxes to the smaller ones, and where can we find kind of a middle ground? So as you can see, those boxes were pretty dang big. They filled up his trunk quite a bit. You could come up with a pretty big box. For 2 12s for sure, that would be enough airspace. For maybe 4 8s, that's a lot of airspace for 4 8s. So would that have been a better choice? Put more of that money and effort into higher powered subs, and just build your own box that's tuned properly. Where do we find the middle ground in all this? So I felt like this was a good way to represent that. So right now we got that standard box, 4.75 cubes in the chamber. I forget what this port is, but it's a pretty dang big port. I'll let you guys find that out for yourselves. The specs are there. Actually, I believe I got a photo of that right here. There we go. So this is that box, you can see. So the box was does it say, oh yeah, internal airspace, tuning frequency. Yeah, it doesn't say the port area, but anyway, you guys could do that for yourselves. But what I also tried with these subs in place was I just fiddled around with the numbers. So let's make the box bigger, make the port bigger, and I didn't find anything that actually worked really well. So nothing that was practical. I believe when I had messed around with this earlier, the box ended up being ridiculously oversized, and then it didn't really, there wasn't it didn't pay out because the box was so oversized that, well, it's completely impractical. Even with this big old 18, your power goes down, none of it worked. So you'd probably end up having to have a better custom box and then a more powerful sub for that application. So those are all things that I want you guys to see, and I want you guys to keep in mind when you're designing and going over your builds. When you decide, okay, I want to do this and this and this, don't necessarily gravitate towards the bigger sub, more cone area. Don't just fall into whatever everybody else is saying. There's a lot of old school guys out there that they used to do it this way, and that was that was it. you know, oh, more cone area, it's gonna be number one, and oh, it's got to be a sealed box or infinite baffle or so on and so on. But that's what we're here to solve, guys. We're trying to figure out what, you know, what works. So as you can see, I'm just fiddling with the numbers and blabbing on, but nothing really works. All of this is unusable, especially at 1200 watts max power. I mean, you know that they could take the power, so why not use it all, right? And if we dumb it down quite a bit, we still, you know, 400, we're at 400 watts right now, 360, and none of those numbers still really give us anything. Once again, this is based off the program. Real world, we might have something different. I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out. You gotta really I gotta really dial it in, so that way I know if I design a box for somebody or for myself that I'm not wasting any money, wasting any time, you know, with garbage. I don't want to have to be throwing stuff away or calling it, you know, no bueno because I didn't do any calculations. I just, you know, assumed that it was going to work here or there, you know, assumed that a bigger box was going to be better or more port area. No. Guys, this is heavy calculus, this is heavy math, this is heavy physics, and all you got to do is know what this stuff is doing, know what its maximum capabilities are, and dial it in. So yeah, I'm fiddling with the numbers the best as I can right now, and I still, for me personally, we're tuned at max power 37 hertz, 360 watts. It's giving us a Helmholtz of 22 hertz, and still we're peaking out like crazy. And that's not even, we're not even in a cabin yet, so maybe that would help with some of the lows, but yeah, I don't really see it happening, guys. At least not with this combination, subwoofer and ridiculous enclosure. Let's see what the enclosure looks like, get us an idea. So let's make this shape more like a box. So 436 liters, that's, I'm sure that's somewhere in the 8 cube range, and that's gigantic. And then that doesn't even include the port. So totally impractical, right? Totally impractical. Unless you had only could run maybe 400, 500 watts, then, and if you wanted to tune low, well, this might be your best option. Ridiculously oversized box, and yeah, so I'm gonna cancel that out so it doesn't save. So yeah, so then I started thinking, okay, well, what would be a better situation for making sure that, you know, I stayed under that 4.5 cubes. Actually, we could say it's a 5 cube box, right? Because just the chamber alone was 4.75 cubes, about 130, you know, liters. Those numbers totally screw me up having to do the conversions, but I do my best, guys. I'm not gonna save. I'll keep that where it's at. Let's take a look at the sealed box real quick. Once again, I plugged in those numbers for the SDR, or I'm sorry, the SDN, or you know, it's SDR. I don't know why I have an SDN up here. Hold on, my dog's barking like crazy. We'll check it out. Okay, where was I? Dogs are barking like crazy at the neighbors over here. Yeah, sealed box. So let me change this real quick. So let's just look at the curve. That's right. So this is an auto-generated sealed enclosure for that 18-inch sub, based on the parameters of the subwoofer, and yeah, so it auto-generated based on those parameters a ridiculously oversized box. So I don't know if that would be accurate. I would never even consider this design, because 2,930 liters, I don't even know what the size of that box would be. Bigger than your car, bigger than your SUV. But let's look at the curve anyway. I mean, the curve looks pretty good. It definitely starts to roll off on the low end, even though the box is ridiculously oversized. in my opinion. I mean, somebody might say, yeah, that's a perfect box for me. I don't know. I have no idea. I doubt this can handle 1200 watts, but we're gonna try it anyway. Yeah, not even close. So at 1200 watts full go, it's showing in that sealed box it would still at least do a 130 dB wise, from about 100 down to 48 hertz. How accurate that is, I don't know. Once again, this is outside of a cabin. It's probably like in a large warehouse, which you would use this for. I don't know. Let's lower that power a little bit to something reasonable. Let's say 400 watts, right? All day long. Yeah, even at 400 watts, we're still going to be achieving that X max. Down at 38 hertz, we're going to be peaking out anything below that. Limited by diaphragm displacement, so let's lower the wattage even more. Let's say we got a super efficient system or a tiny little amp and we just got something. Yeah, even then we're still 30 hertz on down. It's gonna unload quite a bit, but our SPL, it's not too bad. This would be usable, for playing, good. Maybe let's say for like a home theater. That's pretty good, right? Big giant box, might as well be infinite baffle, But anyway, yeah, I just threw that on there just for fun. So let's see. Let me pause again. All right, so we're back. Got my brain together a little bit again. So what I was trying to explain to you guys is that where do we kind of find a middle ground between like subwoofer power, practical box size, for the application. So whether you have like a large cabin or a small cabin, where do you start your design at, and what do we do? Well, I can't tell you everything, but what I did start to think is that, okay, what about some of those subwoofers that like a 10 has the same basically has the same magnet and coil, and they use it for their 18s all the way up to their 18s. So the 10, the 12, the 15, and the 18s are all the same, right? As far as the motor force goes, the only thing that really changed, like they literally use the same spider, same motor, same coil, magnet, and all that changed was the cone area. So I tried to find the best sub that can replicate that. And if you ever looked at or have ever heard of the Sundown Audio M series, that's a good example of a 10 through 18 inch subwoofer that uses the same exact motor structure. So I plugged in those numbers, and right now what you're looking at is the Sundown M18. And if we switch over to the 10, the numbers are pretty much the same, and which they should be pretty dang close, other than the actual cone area. So then I said, okay, well, what would the box, like the most optimized box for every application? So I started plugging in. Like I said, I spent a lot of time on this program that you guys don't get to see, even though my videos are an hour long of me just rambling about randomly. There's a whole bunch of behind the scenes that I sit here and just click away about, at the numbers, and try to in my own head figure out what these different parameters would do, what these different things would do, so I get a better intuitive feel about what to do. So yeah, so if we have basically the same power, motor force, what does the cone area actually do, and then what does it do depending on the box? So whether it's a sealed box or ported, a transmission line all the way up to a horn, right? And then how can we dial it in to where you only have so much room? What size, what cone area would work best for the amount of space you have for a box and the amount of space you have for your cabin? Because we're talking about car audio here and not home audio. So yeah, so you want to try to figure out what those numbers really do. So let's we're at the 18 right now. see, I don't remember what I have. Okay, so let's keep in mind this is for an 18, guys. This is, I believe it's an auto-generated ported box, and it decided to make, based on those parameters, a pretty large box, right? 947 liters. I want to say that's close to at least 8 cubes. Sorry about the conversion, guys. I don't have that on top of my head, and I don't have the math. I don't have anything written down. It's just, I'm just going as is. So you'd have to do the conversions yourself until I dial it in a little bit better. It's just kind of, it's not exact right now, guys. So I'm not trying to push it too, you know, right on the money yet. But we're getting there. So you can see it's a pretty small port, but relative to that box size, you know, that they're gonna work together based on those parameters. Like I said, it's all has to do with the speaker parameters that you get this auto-generated enclosure. So, which looks fair when you look at the actual curve. That, in my opinion, if these numbers are good, I would be really happy seeing this nice long stretched out curve like this, because that's telling me I'm getting some excellent bandwidth. You know, 100 hertz, since we probably don't use our subs in this range anyway. We're probably looking, you know, most practically at, you know, 80 hertz, 70 hertz down to 20 hertz. I tend to gravitate towards that 20 to 60 hertz. That's usually, you know, for me, bandwidth wise, that's what I expect my subs to be able to play all day long. Maximum efficiency, maximum power, smallest possible box. But as you can see, we're stretched out even further than that, even down to the really good lows, which is great, right? I mean, that's a pretty big box, so you would need a lot of space. So keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and turn up the power. So that subwoofer is supposed to be good for 35 millimeters X max, and I don't remember if 2000 watts was the max power or if that's RMS, but let's go plug in the numbers. Alright, so it looks pretty good up until we see this kind of a peak right here. Once again, guys, supposedly this is telling us that we're gonna hit that max excursion, maybe even X mech. So you could be seeing problems there, but what I want you guys to notice is this lower end. Lower end's still good, and we have a good upper range too, so it's all pretty flat, a little bit above that 130, so we'll say we're about 132 dB. We could easily EQ or DSP this down so that way we don't go overboard in this area. So if you ask me, that this subwoofer with that box would do really well in a wide bandwidth, so that would be pretty dang good for all day playing. I mean, of course you can lower these numbers, get a nice flat 130, you know, DSP, EQ, everything right there at that point, so it's nice and flat, or give yourself a little bit of a bump in the low range or in the mid range, depending on where you like it at. So yeah, that's what I want you guys to see when it comes to that design. So the only thing we're really losing out on is space. In this particular case, yeah, we're gonna have to sacrifice a lot of space in order to get this kind of sound quality. Now, of course, you could always minimize that amount of space. Let's take a look at what that looks like real quick. So go to power. Let me plug in that 2000 watts, and keep in mind 2000 watts, that's a lot of power to be running all day long. You probably wouldn't be doing that, but I'm gonna leave it there for now. I'll leave it there for now and just play with the numbers a little bit and see what happens. So let's say we don't have that much room, we don't have 936 liters. Let's say we only have half that. Let's say we go back down to that Skar size box, which was about 430 liters. So now we're building a custom box, or we already have one, or let's say you got that Skar box already, and you say you want to upgrade your sub, right? So let's increase the length of that port. I don't remember the numbers of that Skar box, but we're just gonna wing it here and see what happens. Alright, so let's keep it there. That looks like it's a pretty good curve. Let's check out the schematic real quick just to get an idea. Okay. So roughly a 5 cubic foot box with a pretty small port. I mean, a lot of port area, but it's relatively small. I mean, you can't really tell based on the diagram, but it's doing pretty good. Really peaky up in that 30 hertz range, 34 hertz. So you can always, you know, EQ, DSP that down, and we're still getting a pretty good bandwidth from 20 hertz on up. We're still above 35 dB, and in cabin that might actually translate to what, let's say a 10 dB gain, so 140s, you know, possibly. But yeah, this is just, we're just kind of having fun once again, guys. The whole point is to see relative to cone area. So we're going from an 18-inch subwoofer, we're going to go right to the exact opposite, to a small cone area, 10-inch subwoofer. So let's do that now. Let's cancel this out. Don't want to save this. Alright, so now the same exact Sundown M series. This is a 10-inch. Pretty much the exact same motor. Hopefully these numbers are accurate to the subwoofer itself. Let's see what I got here. A lot of this stuff I already, like I said, I've been working on it for hours and whatever, and I already have numbers plugged in here, dialed in. So yeah, this pretty much looks like a transmission line, right guys? And what I want you guys, the number that I want you to figure in is the total system size, so the total box size, 351 liters. That translates to roughly, off the top of my head, it should be under 4 cubic foot. So maybe 3.5 cubic feet, if anything. Like I said, you guys gotta crunch your numbers yourself on this one. Keep trucking on through. Let's go acoustic power. So you can see, typical transmission line is it's got them devil horns, right? Peak up top, peak down below. Let's give it some maximum SPL number. So 2000 watts. It should be the same motor. This one says it has 35 millimeters of X-Max, even for a 10. Do I believe that? I kind of do. It's a Sundown, right? They tend to do good when it comes to their X-Max. All right, so our last sub with the 18, I believe we're getting deep down below 20 hertz, and we're going all the way up past 100, pretty flat. In this case, we don't have that same response in this design. In this design, we tend to be way peakier in the low end, which it should still hold up. And if you really wanted to keep that high peak, I mean, we're almost at 145 dB. Let's say 143 in the low range, 20 hertz almost. You might want to keep that, and then dial this back down. And then same thing, you might want to keep your upper range. If not, you can dial it back down. Like for me personally, I would probably try to keep everything flat from about 80 hertz, probably 60 hertz actually. I would probably try to keep everything, you know, 135. I would lower this a little bit, so, you know, avoid that X-Max, and then I would keep all that low end peak and then do my cutoff. So to me, that would be good playing, since I really like the lows. I want them to come all the way through and as loud as possible, since the low frequency stuff, that's the stuff that's a little bit harder to get to come through, right? So, and also keep in mind that that box was significantly smaller than what we were working with on an 18. So let's play with the numbers again. I can kind of move that chamber area so you can see. I mean, it's not going to make much of a difference if you were to design the box just like that, but it just shows you based on the schematic that that's what you're working with here. So, and you wouldn't necessarily have to have this T-line design. That's what we're going to play around with here. We're going to plug in that 2000 watts again, X-Max 35 millimeters, play with the chamber a little bit so you can reduce, let's reduce the overall port area. That's a significant reduction. So instead of going from like a 6-inch pipe, you know, let's say we go to like a 5 or 4-inch, something a little bit smaller. That's gonna increase your low end tuning. It's gonna lower your tuning, but it's also gonna decrease the output. Let's increase the length, which should increase, or actually, gotta word this stuff right. It's gonna decrease your tuning frequency, lower your tuning, right? Let's shorten it back up, because I want to make a smaller box, right? So typically a 10, you wouldn't see it in such a big box anyway, right? Everybody like, dang, why is that box so big? So let's decrease it quite a bit. Already that's pretty small. So our chamber is really tiny. Let's make that chamber a little bit bigger, see what happens. So it's not much bigger, it's lowering our tuning even more, raising our upper end. So let's increase our port area a little bit more now. Let's say, because it's a 10, let's say we want to dial it more into the 30 hertz range, right? We don't really care about the 20 hertz. We don't even listen to any of that decaf stuff, right? So let's gear it more towards that. What is it going to look like? Whoa, that was a good spike there, right? Let's hang on to that. Increase the port area even more. Let's keep going until that spike kind of maxes out. This is lowering our tuning, which is not really good right now, since we want to stay in that 30 hertz range. So here we are, 30 hertz. Still peaked out. Let's keep going and see if we can get any more out of it. Nope, don't want to go that way. That's a nice little flat bump there. I like that. It's about 30 hertz right there in that bump. Let's keep it there. Let's take a look at the schematic just to get an idea what we're working with now. Alright, so now we're at 226 liters, which, doing the math, I want to say that's probably about 2.75 cubes, so maybe a little bit under 3 cubes total box volume. Let me make sure. I don't know, because I don't think it's including the port area. Yeah, including port area at 187, which is most of the box. A small little chamber up front for loading. Yeah, that's what you get. So let's lower that power a little bit. Something more, a little more realistic, I guess. So yeah, either way, there we go. 1100 watts. Let's say 1100 all day. You should get a curve something like this with without any equalization or DSP. I mean, for me, typically, this is what I would run comfortably without any kind of equalization, because you're already getting it naturally from the sub combination, is, you know, by itself. So you would just need to, you know, cut off your low end, anything below that 30 hertz tuning frequency. So yeah, and then as you guys can see, you know, that box was significantly smaller than our 18. And supposedly we're approaching above 140 dB in the low range. Our uppers they're kind of weak, so take that into consideration. But for a tiny box, in comparison to the 900 and something liters, the 8 to 9 cubic, you know, foot box, yeah, that's a pretty big difference. So yeah, 226 liters, that's a pretty small box. So there we go. And yeah, guys, that's what I've been working on lately. If you have any real world scenarios, I kind of want to be able to plug in those numbers and try them out for myself and see if they match to the real world actual builds, so that way I can start to kind of play around with these numbers and figure out based on the program ahead of time, before building things up, and then have a better intuitive approach to designing and building based on what I want, whether it be SPL, SQ, bandwidth, all that good stuff. So the other thing I've been doing behind the scenes is I've been kind of, since I have the program to do whatever I want, right? I've been making up subwoofers by pretending, let's say I have a 10-inch subwoofer that has a BL of 30. Let's say the magnets are the newest, latest and greatest Ultra Neos, and they have 35 BL, right? And then let's say we can take our suspension and it's made of, I don't know, something crazy, Kevlar or something, I don't know, something crazy that it's soft but strong, right? So it's doesn't hinder the sub as much. Whatever, I just been kind of plugging in my own numbers based on that concept. Let's say the sub can handle 10,000 watts, and then at the same time, because I can design whatever ported box I want, whatever transmission line, 6th order or horn, I just been playing with those numbers and just trying to see, okay, well, what would it take to do the maximum. Let's say, so for example, SPL, if I wanted to get a single 8-inch or 10-inch could it put out 160 dB for this application, and what would it take? Can I do it in a ported box, or does it need to be in a 6th order, or is my only choice a horn based on that small diaphragm or based on that motor structure, right? So I've been able to kind of use this calculator for basically just that. Let's see, just for fun, I took that same M Series 10, we turned up the BL to 35, so we'll get this number here. This is a low power curve, so this is only like a single watt going into the system. So I'll go back, change this number back to what it initially was. $17.36. So let's do that again. Do a compare. So there you go. So I don't know if you can see that, guys, but see this gray line here? That was when our BL was higher. So when we had a super ultra neo whatever magnet, it actually made our curve a little bit worse when it comes to our mid area, mid tuning. But on the upper range,